Mithra. Let me show you how to spell that. M-I-T-H-R-A. All right? I'm going to share some interesting things with you that you would have to, if you wish to document them, you could document in a library, I guess, and go into the mythological sections. But Mithra was prevalent in Persia. Now remember, Persia is the same as we know today, Iran, and the cult of Mithra flourished in the year 250 BC. So 250 years before Christ, the cult of Mithra was flourishing. It was part of the cult of Zoroaster, and was filled with much that was zodiac and astrological symbolism, and that's where Mithra really came from. Now, when Christianity arose, there was no connection between Christianity and Mithra. At least no one dreamed there was, and I dare say that most people who are Christians today, probably a good 9.5 out of 10 never heard of Mithra. There was no connection. But they were remarkably similar. And that's what's interesting tonight. The cult of Mithra and the cult of Christianity were remarkably similar, though they're separated by 250 years. Now, and as we teach and study historical things, that doesn't seem like a lot of time, yet it is. 250 years is quite a bit. Let me quote you two very, very important Christian scholars and church fathers. One was named Justin Martyr, and the other Christian father was named Tertullian. Tertullian. And they had to deal with this. See, what they had to do, Justin Martyr and Tertullian, as Christian teachers and fathers of the church at that time, they had to explain to somebody, what the heck is, what's this? They're so similar. Now, what's going on? And this is what they said. Justin Martyr said that the similarity of Mithra and Christianity was because of the devil. That was their explanation. And Justin Martyr said, quote, Jesus said, "This is my body, this is my blood, do this in remembrance of me." The wicked devil imitated this in the mysteries of Mithra. In other words, Mithra said, "This is my body, this is my blood, do this in remembrance of me." And Justin Martyr said, the devil imitated this. It's like, what was the fellow on television? The devil did it, you know. He said, the devil did it. It wasn't me. The devil did it. Now, Tertullian, the other Christian church father, in talking about it, said, baptism is the channel which is imitated in the rites of the notorious Mithra. This is the work of the devil. So communion, this is my body, this is my blood, and baptism were part of the cult of Mithra 250 years before Jesus was born. And Justin Martyr and Tertullian said the devil did this. Now, Tertullian said another thing of Mithra. Satan celebrates the oblation of the bread, in other words, communion, in Mithra. Mithra also has his virgins. He has succeeded in adapting to his profane creed the very documents of the divine things of the Christian saints. Communion, baptism, and virgins. And so when reminded that Mithra was 300 years before Christ, Tertullian said, Mithra imitated the prophecies to come. So they had an answer. But it's a weak answer, and that's one of the things that we look at, and it's so strange, and that's why we call this little get-together tonight Mithra, Jesus' twin, because Mithra had his communions, his baptism, virgin birth, and all of this kind of stuff. And then, of course, Christians came along 2,000 years ago, practically, ancient people, to make excuses as to how come Mithraism and Christianity were so similar. But even the early church fathers didn't reveal the extent of the similarity between Mithra and, the Christian religion as we know it. What did they teach? Interestingly enough, the cult of Mithra taught the existence of heaven and hell. Exactly the same. Mithra taught of the immortality of the soul, eternal life. So here we have Mithra, communion, baptism, virgin birth, heaven and hell, immortality of the soul, 250 years before Jesus. Both practice baptism, both practice communion of bread and wine, and this is an interesting thing. One of the fundamental tenets of Mithraism, which came out of Zoroaster, out of Iran, was this: you must be born again. The second birth, Mithra. And that's what's so remarkable about this. And I think what you should do, and I know there's a lot of people along the network, go to the library, look up the cult of Mithra, and see for yourself. You must be born again. And Mithra was believed to be a mediator between man and God. He will intercede on your behalf, Mithra. Now, let's see if we can find out a little bit about the personality of this Mithra, okay? We do know the date of his birth. Maybe not the year, but we know the day that he was born. Mithra was born on December the 25th. That's his birth. Mithra's holy and sacred day was the day of the sun. Sunday. And Mithraism, which was, as I said, come out of Iran, out of Persia, through Zoroaster, through the great god of fire, Ahura Mazda, flourished at that time. Close to 300 years before Christianity, before Jesus Christ was born. Now, Christianity not only copied from Mithra, but they copied from others. Let me show you something. How many of you have ever heard of the Epiphany? Okay. Epiphany. There's a church, a Catholic church not too far from here, up in Bricktown, the Church of the Epiphany. That celebration is the day Jesus was anointed into the Christhood and is celebrated on January the 6th. That's the date of the Epiphany. It's interesting that January the 6th is the date hallowed through Mithraism and into the Egyptians as the day Persephone gave birth to Dionysius, the god of bread and wine. January the 6th, the day of the Epiphany. So, everything that you've got in your church calendar was hooked from somebody else. It's too much to be a coincidence. And I think that you'll enjoy this too. I think you'll find this interesting. On December the 24th, Christmas Eve, the disciples of Mithra would maintain a vigil. Now get this. These are the things you're going to have to, if you want to get into this and study this, you have to go into the library, you have to get books, you have to look up books on mythology and ancient religions, and you have to study Mithra. And you'll find that on December the 24th, the disciples would come and they would stand around the temple, and at the breaking of dawn, the priest would emerge from the temple on the morning of December the 25th and announce to all, God is born. Say. That's strange, isn't it? It's interesting. It's very interesting because it's true. So when Christianity chose December the 25th as the birthday of Christ, they made a great concession to Mithra. See, it wasn't Mithra that made a concession to Christianity. It was the Christians who made a tremendous concession to the cult of Mithra by proclaiming the birth of the God-man, December the 25th, the date of Mithra's birthday. When Christianity decided on the date of the Passion of Christ, which is March 22nd to the 25th, and then around that time, they made a concession to the much earlier, what was called the Addis Sibyl cult, whose passion was exactly the same time. And I've told you of other gods throughout the symbolisms and the mythology who shared the same time, because it has nothing to do with when somebody was born or when somebody rose. It has to do with the seasons. It has to do with the spring and the new life of the spring and so forth and so on. Mithraism had another similarity to Christianity. It made no provision for women. Women were regarded as causes of exotic, erotic desires and as the instrument of the evil one. And they were not allowed to talk, they were not allowed to hold any positions, and of course that's the foundation of our Christian men's clubs all over the world. Mithra grew greatly under the imperial expansion of a very strange person whose name is in the Bible, quite a few places. But this is the man who spread the cult of Mithraism through Zoroaster. His name was Cyrus. He was the king. And his name shows up a lot in your Bible. So here's the man, Cyrus, who extolled the great god Ahura Mazda, who extolled the great Persian prophet Zoroaster, and who spread also the knowledge of the cult of Mithra all over that part of the world that he had, domination of. But the interesting part, and I never stop to really be amazed at this whenever I read it. Understand what I'm saying. Cyrus was king of Persia. That's Iran. His god was Ahura Mazda. His prophet was Zoroaster, and he was one of the great exponents of the cult of Mithra. And he spread this all over. He followed this all over. I mean, he was dedicated to Zoroaster. He was dedicated to Ahura Mazda. He was dedicated to Mithra. And look what the Bible says about him. Page 403 in those little Bibles. And for the rest of you, it's 2 Chronicles is the name of the book. It's one you don't get into too often. 2 Chronicles, and if you go to 2 Chronicles chapter 36. 2 Chronicles chapter 36. And look at verse 22. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, this is the fellow we're talking about. This is the guy who's going around spreading the cult of Mithra and Zoroaster. The word of the Lord spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all of his kingdom and put it in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth has the Lord God of heaven given me, and he has charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? The Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. This is the guy who is spreading the cult of Zoroaster, Ahura Mazda, and Mithra. And here's the Bible saying that the Lord stirred him up, and all the kingdoms of the earth had been given to him. They weren't given to Moses. They weren't given to an evangelist. They weren't given to a Catholic priest or a Protestant minister or a Jewish rabbi. They're given to an Iranian king, not much unlike Ayatollah Khomeini, and all of these strange gods of Ahura Mazda, Zoroaster, and Mithra, who he was championing all over the world. This is the one that your Christian Bible selected to build the temple in Jerusalem. That's him. Look his name. Go to the. One of the few people in the Bible anybody can prove lived. You can't prove hardly anybody in the Bible lived, except this guy. This guy is a historical figure. He was killed in a battle skirmish on the southeast border between Iran and Iraq, or Persia and Babylon. And it's just amazing to me. It's the best kept secret in religion, isn't it? That nobody knows, and nobody ever told anybody this. Of all the people that quote-unquote the God of the Christians and Jews could have picked to construct the temple, to pick one who is spreading the cult of Mithra and Ahura Mazda and Zoroaster, Cyrus of Persia, of Iran. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Mithra was the lord of the sun. And he was a protector. See, sometimes you try to, when you try to figure out the connection. So if we have Cyrus, Cyrus is the one who's championing. We know who Zoroaster is. Zoroaster is the prophet. Okay? Zoroaster is the prophet. Ahura Mazda is God. Okay. Now, we raised the question some weeks ago, the very strange question, that since it was Zoroaster who sent the Magi to proclaim Jesus Christ, was it indeed the fact that Jesus Christ was the Son of God? Was he the son of Ahura Mazda? You know, that's a very interesting thing to think of. But let me show you where we get here. Zoroaster is the prophet of Ahura Mazda. Mithra is the protector. Okay? Mithra is the protector of Ahura Mazda. So that's an interesting thing, and that's how they fit into this thing here. Okay, so we know who the players are basically. Cyrus is the physical body who's going around and spreading the cult of Ahura Mazda. Zoroaster is the one who's entering the prophecies of Ahura Mazda. Mithra is the protector of Ahura Mazda. But remember that it is Ahura Mazda who is God. And that's an interesting thing, too, because, you know, in Christianity, God has no name. They don't know the name of God. Well, maybe we do now, huh? He was the power by which Ahura Mazda created mankind. So in other words, all mankind was created by Ahura Mazda through this God person called Mithra. It's interesting to note, okay, that on December the 25th, Mithra was born in a cave, Jesus was born in a cave, and we're not saying December the 25th, Krishna was born in a cave, but Krishna was born in a cave. And it's interesting to note a tremendous similarity there. And in each case, Mithra, Jesus, Krishna, the event was witnessed by shepherds. Shepherds came and witnessed the event of the birth of Mithra. Now this is interesting, because as Mithra grew in stature, he became connected with a very strange cult which was known as the Bull cult. The Bull cult of Mithra. And as identified as the Bull cult of Mithra, Mithra took upon himself the name of a strange trio which makes up the Israel of Israel. His name was El. And the Bull cult is just exactly what it says. It's the power within that which is the physical. Isis, who is the feminine spirit, Ra, who is the masculine mind, and El, which is the manifestation of the power within the flesh. Israel. And it's all anything but Jewish, anything but Christian. It's all from the sands of Iran and Iraq, or as they were known at that time, Babylon and Persia. It's an interesting thing. Now this is what they would do. See, and I'm not going to have you go to it, but in Exodus 29 it talks about taking a young bull and sacrificing the bull. Okay, but the bull of Mithra was sacrificed that mankind might have the bread of life and mankind may drink the wine. And what happened to Mithra was simply that he said that all then would be washed clean. Everyone's sins would be washed clean in the blood of the bull. And when Christianity came, everybody's sins are washed clean in the blood of the Lamb. Folks, you stole it. If there was copyrights in these days, Christianity would be in court and they'd lose big time because they stole the whole thing. Stole every bit of it. Lifted it. Plagiarized the whole thing from the cults of the ancient religions of Iran. And what happened is when this became very apparent, this despot who was the leader of Christianity back in the heyday of it when it started, named Constantine, found that there was one group who had all the Christian things before the Christians did, and this is the group that Constantine set out to destroy, and he did. He totally liquidated them. Mithraism was very tolerant of other religions, but Christianity was not tolerant of Mithra. And they eliminated Mithra. Christians invaded Alexandria, Egypt, and totally destroyed the library of the sacred mysteries and destroyed the temple of Mithra in Alexandria. The temple of Mithra was in Alexandria, Egypt, and it was destroyed by what we call the Crusades. It couldn't be allowed to flourish because there was communion in there. There was baptisms in there. There was virgins in there. And there was all of the other things that we associate. There was a God-man born on December the 25th who rose, and all of these things at Easter. And all of this stuff, the similarities between Mithraism and Christianity was such it was obvious that Christianity stole the thing. So the way you get rid of that is to wipe out the adversary. And they did. Killed the people who were the followers of Mithra and destroyed their mighty temple in Alexandria, Egypt. So much for Mithra. That was the end of him. But as a deep part of Zoroaster and Ahura Mazda, the Mithra cult had a very, very pronounced effect on Christianity. And I'll show you how Christianity was touched by Mithra. Christianity was touched by Mithraism through a very strange group that had taken to themselves much of the ethic of the cult of Mithra. They were known as the Essenes. They practiced much of the cult of Mithra. The Essenes came close to those things that had been pouring out of India and Iran, and the cult of Mithra was part of it. So as people who follow mysticism and study mysticism and understand mysticism, we also have to look at Mithra as an inner experience. And basically that's what he was. Mithra is the energizing power which awakened the spiritual life within. It is the stirring of that power and is represented by the bull cult, represented by Taurus, it is the origin point of the bull Mithra cult. There is a book, and you'll never, I doubt if you'd be able to find this, but it might be interesting for you folks who like to hang out in libraries or whatever. There's a book written by a fellow named Frederick Cornwallis, Cornwallis, and the name of the book is Myth, Magic, and Morals. Myth, Magic, and Morals. This is what he says. Listen very closely, okay? No intelligent or thoughtful person who is open to listen or study can fail to have a clear conception of the manner in which Christian doctrine and organizations were forged out of the religions that had grown from primitive times. He says, no thinking person. But see, you're not allowed in Christianity, you're not allowed to think, you're not allowed to discuss this stuff. You're called a heretic or a devil or an evil person. He says that no intelligent person can fail to have a clear conception of the way that the Christian doctrine was forged. You know what forgery is? It's a forgery. It's stolen from the religions of the ancients. And then the amazing thing is, we then regarded all these ancient people. We made up a word for them. What do we call them? Pagans. They're the pagans. We stole all of their religions, called it ours, and said they're the pagans. Dr. Martin Lawson states this. Now listen to this. This is interesting. Dr. Martin Lawson, who is a theological writer. Christianity owes a vast intellectual and emotional debt to other religions. It is therefore completely unacceptable for Christianity to be intolerant, since without the ancient pagan religions, Christianity would not exist.
They say Moses took the...
Now you have to, what is it?
They say that Moses took the laws from, when he wrote up that
Yeah.
that was...
Moses took the laws out of Egypt. Moses took the laws which began from all of these strange cults. In fact, if you really get into that, which is an interesting thing, his name was Ramoses, R-A-M-O-S-E-S. There wasn't even any name Moses. Moses isn't even a Jewish name. Christianity, Dr. Lawson goes on and says, is a highly composite doctrine which combined many of the age-old concepts developed first by Egyptians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Persians, Buddhists, Hindus, and Jews, etc., etc., etc. And they took it all, made it their own, and called everybody else pagans. When any quote-unquote pagan, this is an interesting thought, when any pagan converted to Christianity, they were simply recovering what was their own. What was their own. So if you're a Christian who loves Jesus, you've got to acknowledge. Once you introduce yourself, and what you should really do, if you're really interested in this stuff, you should go into the libraries and you should start looking it up. Because, somebody owes something. I mean, Christianity has made billions and billions. Probably some of the richest organizations with more of the money of the world are religious organizations, and they stole it. The whole story, I mean, the whole classic patterns, they stole from these other places and made the money with it. You must acknowledge, as Dr. Lawson said, and as Mr. Cornwallis said, that Christianity could not and would not exist without Krishna, Buddha, Mithra, Ahura Mazda, Zoroaster, the Essenes, Osiris, Dionysus, and on and on and on. On and on and on. I mean, even one of the holy things of Christianity is when everybody comes up and they stick their tongue out and they take the wafer and they do all this stuff. And it's all nothing more than copied from the cult of Osiris and Dionysus, which originated in tribal cannibalism. Drinking the blood, eating the flesh, and then gradually growing up through Osiris and Dionysus. So a mighty debt is owed, for without them, what I'm talking about, without Mithra, without Osiris, without Zoroaster, without Ahura Mazda, without Cyrus himself, you Christians would have no religion at all, because yours is stolen. You never were able to develop a true, authentic religion, and so you copied it from those who came and struggled through the sands and through the deserts and through the ancient places, and you never even acknowledged them. Shame on you! Crooks! Forgers! We have a lawyer in, what do they call people who steal other people's...
Plagiarism.
Right, plagiarism. Plagiarists! See? But, isn't it sad that these types of things, it takes us till we get to this point in our lives to even start discussing them. And this stuff is no further away from you than the nearest library. It's all in there. You can even go to an encyclopedia. You want to go to an encyclopedia. Look up the word Easter. Read about it. The development from the goddess Ishtar. The pagan cult, quote unquote a pagan cult, in which the women would, work. It's a fertility cult. They had all of it done. In the temples in Babylon, where the god, you know what happened? The god Tammuz was Ishtar's husband. Well, he would die every winter and then resurrect every spring out of a gray-colored egg. And 40 days and 40 nights, and they used to call it Count 40. 40 days and 40 nights before Tammuz would jump out of the egg, the women would weep and sit and put ashes on their head, and it was called Count 40. Nowadays they call it Lent. That's what it was. And the men would then go the day before, and they would attend, and they would sit and they would pray to the sun as it rose over the ocean of the east. And in the Bible, in Ezekiel, I think it's the 8th chapter, these things are called abominations. Look, it says, the men are bowing down to the sun rising in the east. Look, the women are doing all of this stuff for Tammuz, or weeping over Tammuz, the Count 40, and all of this stuff. And then on the day of Easter, on the great day of the resurrection, the women would come, and all they wear were Easter bonnets. That's all they would have on is an Easter bonnet, and they would be the ladies of the day. And when a fella came in for Sunday morning service or church service, he'd pick the lady that was, and they would have it right there, and get on with it right there, and the fertilities would go like crazy all over the place. The rabbits would be running around, baby chicks would be running around, and all of this stuff. And that's the day Amazingly. In other words, basically the temple in Babylon at that time was a whorehouse. It's basically what it was. It was just a place of prostitution, and it became part of the religious cult. This is the day that Christianity has decided to make their most holy day. Somebody tricked them. They really screwed it up with that one. Somebody really tricked them. Because you take the resurrection day of Jesus Christ and you name it after the day of the prostitutes of Babylon under the goddess Ishtar. And as I said, you don't have to really get too deep in mythology to look that up. If you got a encyclopedia home, you can look it up. And that's where it came from. And that's your most holy day. I think what is amazing is that in spite of all of this, people still flock to these places and they just consider it as holy as can be. As holy as can be. That is the most blatant indication of the actual corrupt state of that religion, that they cling to this thing called Easter as their holy day, which, as I said, has its roots in this amazing barbaric type of disgrace to women, and that's what it was. It was, it was typical of the women had to serve as prostitutes on that day, and when you came to church, you not only picked out your pew, you picked out your whatever, and then off you went. And that's your holy day, and that's the one day of the month, one day a year you got to go to church, or they'll kick you out. Yes.
Gotta ask you two things.
Why don't you stand up, because it's hard to.
Jesus was, well, I heard from the Essenes.
Yes.
He was taught by them.
Yes.
He came out of that. And the other thing was, December 25th is like a fallacy, right? Because he wasn't actually born on that day.
The Son is born on December the 25th. That's why they all were part of it.
It was really nice in 14 or something, so it was really closer to breaking of spring.
Yeah,
right?
well, if you get down to if you want to get down to the literalism of Jesus, that's. I'll tell you the truth. I'll tell you the truth. I have a.
Because they clocked it by the moon.
Yeah, I have a difficulty even with the whole thing because, to me, the existence of Jesus is the existence of life and the existence of that part of life which is within us. But the existence of a man whose whole life is focused around the movement of the sun is a little difficult for me to take. Okay, I have problems getting into a real aspect of that when his life duplicates the sun. And then, of course, I guess the greatest problem I have, and what we looked at this morning was so beautiful. Here we had this morning a situation in which God gave his word to Jonah and broke it. Because if he had kept his word, people would have gotten hurt. And there, when I see that is the type of God that I would follow, and I follow, and to see the type of God that we hear about, one who cannot figure any way to forgive people but by slaughtering this young man. This young man who supposedly goes around doing good, healing people, being kind, right? The Prince of Peace, and the only way that we can forgive everybody is by slaughtering this person in the most barbaric way. I really doubt the whole story, but I don't doubt it from the symbolic state of what it really is, and that is a crucifixion within us, a resurrection within us, a Jesus Christ who dwells and lives within us and is looking to be born within each one of us. And I think to go any different way and to take this literally is really a shame. And I think also that is borne out by that magnificent testimony contained within the Gospel of Thomas, which was written by Thomas, who was one of the disciples of Jesus, in which John the Revelation and all this goes up into the cave, not being able to bear watching Jesus hanging on a cross, and there he meets Jesus, and they both had a good laugh about it. And then he says, when John comes out of the cave, he goes down, and everybody's crying at the cross, and he laughed. And he went away laughing. He says, because I knew that God had done all of this, and these are the exact words, and you should find that passage. He says, I knew that God had done all of this symbolically for the salvation of mankind.
That's in the Catholic Bible?
No, that's in one of the books of the Bible that the church didn't allow to enter. It's called the Lost Books of the Bible, but it's a gospel written by Thomas. It's called the Gospel of Thomas. Where you can read about it is in, if you want to go to like Waldman's books, you can find Joseph Campbell's, I believe it's in Occidental Mythology by Joseph Campbell, and he talks about it. I'm not sure if it's Occidental or Oriental mythology, but he talks about this tremendous part, you see, of the, he covers the Passover in which they circle danced, and the 12 disciples would spin around, and Jesus was in the center, and he was representing the sun, and the 12 disciples were dancing around the outside and all of this kind of business. And then it goes on to the crucifixion, how it was amazing, because there's Jesus hanging on the cross, but when John went up into the cave, he was standing there, and they both had a big laugh.
They deleted a lot of those books because they contradicted.
They deleted the books that did not support the theories of the church. That's exactly right. You're exactly right. Well, that's so much for Mithra, and I hope that you enjoyed sharing that, and I hope that you'll go down to the library or wherever you do look up your books and look up about the Mithra cult. Look up, at the same time, look up Zoroaster, look up Cyrus, look up Ahura Mazda, and really you'll start to see all of the things that you thought were Christian actually belong to somebody else. And that's too bad, because when you do steal things, eventually you should have the courage to give credit to the other guy. Okay, thank you very much, and John will come on and we'll see you in a little bit.